I've been wondering these past few days, why do so many good agents still feel stuck on leads and systems? I'm talking about agents who know how to work, know how to serve clients well, and still end the week feeling like the business takes too much effort to hold together. They're doing the job. They're showing up for people. They're moving pieces forward. But underneath all of that, there's this feeling that too much still depends on memory, extra effort, and keeping a lot of moving parts straight in their head. This came up a lot in conversations recently. Two phrases kept showing up: I need more leads and I need better tech. Those are both real concerns. At the same time, those phrases can hide the actual issue if you stop there. Sometimes the business is not short on activity. It's short on structure. Sometimes the tools are not missing. They're just not connected in a way that makes the day easier to run. So that's what I want to talk through today. If your business feels heavier than it should, where is that weight actually coming from? And if you've been saying you need more opportunity or better systems, what's worth looking at first before you decide what has to change? And before we get into it, if this channel helps you think more clearly about growth, workflow, and the everyday business of being an agent, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. We pay attention to what agents are actually wrestling with, and that shapes what we make here. Let's start with leads. A lot of agents assume the problem begins at the top of the funnel. Sometimes it does. But a lot of the time, the bigger issue shows up after the first contact. The inquiry comes in, the response goes out, and then the process gets less defined from there. Follow-up depends on what the day looks like. Notes are somewhere, reminders are somewhere else. And the next step is not always obvious in the moment. That creates a feeling a lot of agents know well. They stay busy, they keep working, and yet the pipeline never feels fully settled. One week feels full, the next week feels thin, then they go back into lead generation mode again. Even though part of the issue may be that earlier opportunities were never handled inside a clean enough process to mature the way they could have. I've seen very capable agents end up in that cycle simply because the business around them is asking too much from them manually. They are answering, tracking, remembering, sorting, and reconnecting on the fly. That may work for stretches of time, especially when someone is highly motivated and strong with people, but it gets harder to sustain as life and production both pick up. So when someone says, I need more leads, one of the first questions I want to ask is what happens after the lead shows up? Where does it go? How is it tracked? How does the person stay in motion in your world after that first response? If those answers feel fuzzy, there may be more opportunity in the current business than it looks like at first glance. The tech conversation usually sits right next to this. When agents say they want better tech, they're usually talking about the day-to-day experience of running the business. They want things to be easier to find, easier to move forward, and easier to trust. They want to know where to look, what needs attention, and what has already been handled without checking 6 different places. Good tech helps create that kind of clarity. It supports communication, document flow, task visibility, and organization in a way that feels usable when the day gets crowded. It gives the agent a place to work from, not just another platform to log into. And that difference matters because most agents do not need more software for the sake of having more software. They need a setup that makes the business easier to manage consistently. This is part of what drew us to Real in the first place. And it is part of why we built Real Edge Network the way we did. Real Edge Network is centered on practical support that agents can actually apply. On the website, we lay that out clearly. Buyer guides, listing kits, AI tools, templates, weekly coaching calls, transition support, and a sponsor who stays involved through the process. That piece matters because even strong tools still need context around them. Agents benefit from seeing how something works in real business, how another agent is using it, what to do first, and where to go when they hit a snag. Real Edge Network was built to help close that gap, so the platform is supported by examples, structure, and real access to people who are in the work. On the real side, the public support materials make it clear there is an onboarding path and a sequence for getting started. That's helpful because a lot of agents don't avoid change because they haven't thought about it. They avoid it because they assume the process will be disruptive, confusing, or hard to control while business is still moving. A visible process changes the emotional feel of that decision. It gives someone something concrete to evaluate. What would happen first? What support exists? How are licenses, boards, and active business handled? Even for an agent who is just gathering information, that level of clarity is useful because it replaces vague concern with something more specific and manageable. Real Edge Network also talks openly about the support environment inside Real being more digital, more flexible, and more distributed. That's important context. It means the people around you matter. Sponsor fit matters. The network you plug into matters. If someone is trying to build with more structure, they need to know who they can reach out to, who can give a real answer, and who will stay engaged beyond the first conversation. For an agent trying to sort through their own situation honestly, I think a few practical questions go a long way. Where do your best leads come from right now? What usually happens in the first 48 hours after they come in? Where is follow-up being managed today? And when your business gets busy, what tends to slip first? Those questions usually uncover the real pressure points pretty quickly. Sometimes the answer is fairly simple. The business needs a tighter rhythm. The follow-up process needs to be cleaner. A few routines need to be tightened up. Other times, the setup itself is creating drag week after week, and the agent is working around the system instead of being supported by it. That affects more than convenience. It changes how much energy the business takes to run, how steady the pipeline feels, and how much room there is to think ahead. The economics matter too. Real's public-facing materials highlight the 85-15 commission split, the $12K annual cap, and no monthly fees for many agents. That matters because margin shapes options. It affects what someone can reinvest into the business, how much pressure they feel from overhead, and how much flexibility they have while they build. I want to be clear about the posture here. This video is not about trying to push anyone into a move. That is not how we approach these conversations. The goal is to help agents think carefully about what feels hard in their business right now, what may be causing that, and what kind of support would actually help. That posture matters, and it's consistent with the way we believe these conversations should happen. For a lot of agents, the best next step is a simple review of recent activity. Look at the last 10 leads that came in. Where did each one come from? How quickly did you respond? What happened in the first few days after that? Which ones moved into a real process and which ones lost momentum? That kind of review tells you a lot more than a general feeling of being busy or frustrated. Then do the same thing with your systems. Where do conversations happen most often? Where do notes live? Where are tasks being tracked? Where do documents move? If one client or one transaction requires you to jump between too many places just to stay oriented, that's worth paying attention to. The issue may not be effort. The issue may be how the work is arranged. That kind of review gives you something concrete to work with. It makes the problem more visible. It helps separate a lead issue from a workflow issue and a workflow issue from a support issue. Once you can see that more clearly, your next decision usually gets easier too. You're no longer reacting to a general sense that things feel off. You're responding to something specific. When we built Real Edge Network, the goal was to support that operating side of the business in a practical way. Agents need clear examples, useful templates, strong weekly coaching, transition help when they need it, and direct access to people who understand the work because they're doing it too. That's the focus. Helping agents build a business that feels more organized, more supported, and easier to run. So if lead generation has felt uneven lately, or your systems feel harder to manage than they should, start by slowing the situation down and reviewing what is actually happening. Look at the path from first inquiry to active client. Look at where follow-up is handled. Look at whether your tools help you stay oriented during a busy week. Most of the time, the answer becomes clearer once you see the pattern instead of just feeling the weight of it. And that kind of clarity is useful whether you stay exactly where you are or start exploring a different setup. Either way, you make a better decision when you understand the problem well enough to name it. If this brought up something you've been feeling in your own business, put your biggest friction point in the comments. I'd love to see what keeps coming up for agents right now. And if you want to talk through your situation, have a conversation with us. We're happy to walk through what you're seeing, what feels heavy, and whether Real Edge Network might be a fit for where you're headed. The links and information are in the description. And if you want more videos like this on agent workflow, growth, systems, and the real decisions behind building a stronger business, make sure you're subscribed. We've got more coming.